Boa tarde, pessoal. Bem-vindos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. One more afternoon here in KM Brazil 2020. Our panel now will have Vitor Alves with Digital KPM panel.
Às 16 horas.
Afterwards, at 4 o'clock, we will have Elisandra, which will be the moderator, and Victor is going to moderate the panel. Now he's going to present the speakers later on. I invite you to take part this Friday on our meeting via Simpla, the KM multiplier. We are going to see the KM scene. We would like to talk about every kinds of companies everywhere to have a very complete scenario so that we can have input to work with knowledge management in the next year, so that we can check what our country needs from us, what the world needs from us in the KM area. Welcome, everyone. Simultaneously, now we are having some some articles presentations. We have Professor Gaspar from Uninove, which is the moderator. Later on, we will have other sessions with PhD Professor Felipe Martins, and this is what is going on today. The sessions are being recorded, and after our conference, you have access to all the recorded sessions. So now, it's with you, Vitor, please. Thank you so much. Thank you, Renata, for the introduction. I'm going to share a brief presentation. So first, I'd like to thank SBGC first for having us, and we are being able to discuss this very relevant topic. I would like to thank the panelists that are here with us. I could cooperate and work with some of them. It's a big pleasure for me to be with you. I'm very glad to talk about it. And who are we? I'm Vitor Alves. I'm only the moderator and this great team that you are talking about. I work with KM. I am postgraduated in KM. André Bell is here too. He's a future designer. He's a consulting professor, and he's an author of some design thinking books. We have PhD Professor Américo Ramos Filho. He is a professor at postgraduate teams in Rural University. He is a researcher in the KM area, and also Alex Bretas, which he is a self-managing facilitator and a TEDx speaker and author as well. It's a pleasure to have you here. I am a big fan. It will be a pleasure to be your moderator. So, to have a context, everyone is going to get started to start our run. So 3 steps. Why? Why do we need to think about KM and continuous learning? What? What is this? What exactly is this company? And how we are going to do it in practice? So let's begin with the why. I'm not going to have any spoiler, okay? But this graph represents and summarizes what's going on in the world, this exponentiality that is having here in technology. And this is going to generate lots of knowledge and exposed knowledge. So there is going to be good and bad outcomes, and you need to know how to deal with it. So there is the technology change that is going to generate this gap, and we need to adjust, we need to tweak. And what is it? The main consulting business talk about it as a learning. We have to adapt, which is to have a continuous learning and learn better. This is how we can adjust to the situation. So this is the article. This is how we can discuss on a C-level. What is adaptation? Is learning better and faster. So learning in itself is a community. We need to learn how to learn. And how can we do it? What is it? So this is where we see the personal knowledge. So one of the models that I like the most is the Jack concept, which is seek, and share. And it's similar to a fishing trip. First, we have to search for knowledge, which is going to help us learn. And when we capture the knowledge, we have to have an understanding. Why are we doing it? How are we going to prepare the field for our learning? We have to understand our context, where we are, and so we are going to have the learning tools and the necessary knowledge to do it. But I can fish and store my fish. So the cooler is going to be full of fish, full of knowledge. And then I have to feed me and my family with this food, which is the knowledge. So if we only capture knowledge and never process it, we are not going to take advantage. We are not going to be nurtured with this knowledge. And what do? So we have our recipe. We ask other people that have already processed it. And if we only process this knowledge and never put into practice, we will never know if we are going to be a good cook, because we only process it and fish our fish. So this is where the sharing concept is in action. Because when we share knowledge, only then you will know if your knowledge is really a good one, if this is going to be useful in your community. And then you are going to have everyone's feedback to know if your knowledge is really very useful. So in general, this process helps you control your system, how to look for it, process, and share the information. And how are we going to do it? I'm not going into details because it's going to be said later on. So there are some components in personal KM so that it's done effectively. So I need to know which kind of knowledge I need to acquire and how I'm going to organize it. So in order to process it, I need to manage my routine, my time. I need organization so that I take action, I learn. If I don't do it, I'm not going to control it, and it's not going to be an effective process. It's not to be an exponent learning. So networking is super important. We have to connect with communities and your networks. And this makes the sharing very easier. So sometimes we are embarrassed to share knowledge because we are afraid of criticism. And when you are living in a practice community, for example, this is easy to be done because your peers can validate your knowledge. And on the graph on the right, you can see two important components when we think on Pkm, which is the direction where we are going, our purpose. Purpose is very interesting for the sake of point of view. And the direction where you are going, you have to understand what you are doing. The ones use it to KM, you are going to have your knowledge capital. This intelligence, which is competitive, is going to help you understand yourself as a person and the things you need to do in order to integrate yourself. And then you are managing people. This is what I would like to say. This is an introduction to our topic. And André Bello is going to say about the why. Professor Américo is going to say about what it is. And Alex is going to end our panel on how to do it. So let's get started.
O André é especialista em design thinking. Né?
André is an specialist in design thinking and the future of work. So there is no one better than him to talk to us about what's happening in the world nowadays. So André, I have a question for you. So the world has been changing really fast, right? So what about the curve? Can you tell us something about the curve? Victor, thank you very much for introducing me so well. I really appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be here with people that I really admire. I had the opportunity of being with Victor before at UFRJ, the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, and I can say that Victor is a hard worker, devoted to KM, Professor Américo Ramos as well. I had the pleasure of meeting him. Alex, the first time we see each other, I know Alex in different contexts, and I really admire his work. It's a pleasure to be here. And we're discussing something really relevant. We are talking about a world in transformation, and the chart that you have mentioned, that I have showed, is really present in my studies. And it shows the gap of the transformations that the world has been undergoing. And this has to do with not only with productivity, but with all human aspects that cannot follow the technological acceleration in the world. So that's the conclusion that we reach. So now we're going to see what we can do, right? So, Victor, when we think of transformation and accelerated transformation, sometimes we forget other things. So we just analyze the present moment. So one thing that I like to say is to remind our audience that the world has always been changing. The universe has always changed. It's a universal prerequisite. So 13.7 billion years ago, the Big Bang happened. So the universe has been changing since then. It has been expanding, ever growing, ever changing, and in many manifestations. There could be cosmical and planetary transformations, but also personal transformations. Philosophers as well, they have understood the flow of change. Heraclitus, he used to say that everything changes, everything flows. And the reason is, so when you dive into a river, the water that is bathing you, it's not the same water if you dive into the same river. The water has changed, and the person is a different person as well. So the person has changed, not only the water. So life is filled with transformation. So we are born and we grow up and we eventually die. But when we think of transformation happening to us, we usually forget that. So the very first thing I would like to talk to you is that the world has always changed. And due to the fact that we are in this transformation, we cannot notice it. So it happens as follows. So when you do not see a relative of yours, a nephew or a cousin, when you see that person after a long time and you realize how this person changed. Because when you move further from that growth, you start to realize that growth. So parents do not notice their kids' growth, right? So there is a quote from Saramago that says, you need to get out the island in order to see the island. So you cannot see yourself if you're not able to escape from yourself, to leave yourself. Of course, it's the transformation we're experiencing is evident, but I think we were not able to understand the magnitude of such transformation. So I would like to bring some references in order to make us move further, right, in history and to understand the big steps that humankind has tread on. Let me give an example. 2 million years ago, we as a species, I would say that we had the first artifact, which is the stone itself, right? Using stones has enabled people to hunt and to change human beings' diet. So this, of course, helped us evolve. So if we analyze this from a revolutionary perspective, this was a huge revolution that happened 2 million years ago. And in order to have the second revolution, the agricultural revolution, it took millions of years. So the configuration of our cities has changed and other things have changed as well. So 2 big revolutions, and between them, millions of years. But you see, revolution is always present. So let's imagine information, okay, which is something more recent. So in the 1950s, in the 1450s, Gutenberg has come up with a printing system, and this has changed the way we consume content and we generate content. So it took humankind 400 years for the personal computer to exist, to change the way we establish connections with information and knowledge. So those old-fashioned revolutions, they took millions of years to happen. But you see, in 400 years, we had experienced a major revolution since the printing. So if we imagine the current moment in 2007, the creation of the iPhone. So 13 years ago, we had this revolution. So before that, before 2007, we communicated differently. So in 2007, the iPhone has brought a different perspective and a different way to consume. And 4 years later, Siri has developed. I mean, it's still incipient, but we can say that Siri can be, I would say, a character of high relevance. So what we can see is that changes have always existed, but I would say that the big revolutions, they are always closer to us, and they are really fast. It is an exponential growth. So we understand that technology itself creates new opportunities for the creation of technology, new technologies. So it is an exponential growth of technology. It is unstoppable. So, and sometimes it is uncontrollable. It is an uncontrollable force. It is a changing vector, absolutely. So the fastest computer in 2018 was a PC called Sonnet, an American computer. It could process 200 petaflops. And this has grown a lot in an exponential way. So before that, 34 and 93 tetaflops. So it is an exponential growth. And Ray Kurzweil, who is a futurologist, he says that in 2029, the computer will not be able to process this information, but it's going to be similar to a human brain, which is the most powerful machine in the world. So we cannot understand how the brain works. But according to Ray Kurzweil, the PCs are going to be could be compared to our brains in 9 years. And in 2060, according to Ray Kurzweil, computers are going to be equivalent to 7 billion human brains. So as if you could have all the inhabitants on Earth and create a big machine, a big processing machine, a huge entity, and we do not know how to work with that, right? So all this growth is supported by Moore's law, which happened in 1965. Moore identified this exponential growth, and I would say that according to researchers, that in the next 100 years in our history, we are going to witness the impact that is equivalent to an impact of 20 million years. So in a very short time, we're going to experience something equivalent to what we have experienced in history. And of course, this brings lots of changes in many different ways. We are here now in a KM forum, which is, I must say, it is an industrial era. So in the past, many job offers are connected nowadays to knowledge, and we have been experiencing the value of what knowledge can provide. Society has been changing, of course, and the economy has been changing because of that. And I would say that technology is a changing vector. And why is that? Because it causes lots of consequences. The way we learn, the way we share, the way we understand what is necessary to be learned, the way we make business, right? So it is a hyper-connected world thanks to technology. And this creates a new dynamic process, very complex dynamics. So this means that we cannot understand in cognitive terms, we cannot understand what's happening because of this fast transformation. And of course, we know that the world has been changing, but nowadays, such transformation is so fast, it's tough for us to understand what's happening. André, thank you very much. So you said lots of interesting things, lots of fundamentals, and you can explain that curve and its consequences. And you have mentioned this hyperconnectivity in the world. So what are the consequences of this hyperconnectivity in the world? And the consequences, what we can expect from that in the future. So could you please expand on that, focusing on KM and Pkm? So, Victor, what we see nowadays, and I would say that it's very popular, it's VUCA world, which is a term that has been popularized the last 5-10 years. That term describes the way we live. So we are not linear, repetitive, predictive world. And now we have a different reality. In the past, we had product lines. And of course, we know nowadays that the world has been changing. But nowadays, we are living a volatile world, an ambiguous world. And why volatile? It happens so fast. Things can change suddenly. For example, the pandemic has changed the world a lot. Not only sanitary conditions, but financial conditions and learning conditions. So this volatile nature is really present nowadays. It is uncertain. Our world is uncertain because we cannot know how those changes are going to affect us, really. It is complex because it has an immense variety of conditions. So systems transform themselves in a very organic way and complex, which means that if we just change one tiny aspect of the gear, so the transformations happen in an uncontrollable way. And it is ambiguous. And the reason for that is that we cannot really understand what is a cause and what is the effect. So things get intertwined. So sometimes we have in organizations, we have projects that want to come up with solutions, not for the causes of the problem, but the effects of the problem. So it means that we have to understand better this complex aspect. Of course, it's very tough to explain such complex nature, to understand this complexity because of the presence of so many variables. But I would say that I have been teaching, I have been learning, the 4 frontiers, right? So I'm going to talk about the 3 first ones, all right? I would say that the first frontier that we have to notice concerning those transformations is the following. We know that technologies are growing fast in an exponential way. And this happens as well with the changes as a side effect of the technologies. So technologies have brought complexity to the world, and this means that changes in our world grow in a different level. So we were in savannas. We have been in savannas for 200 million years, surviving and running away from lions and calculating linearly. So it means that if we saw a lion, we had time to come up with a strategy or escape from the lion. Nowadays, the world is so much faster. So we have niches, we have opportunities that happen way faster. So in the old linear world, we have oscillations, ups and downs of transformation, and maybe 10% more, 10% less. But we were able to understand and react to such transformations. Nowadays, because of this exponential rhythm, I would say the oscillations are not so slight. They change more drastically and in a faster pace. And that's why we are not ready to understand this. So the first frontier that we have to tackle in order to understand all those consequences is that we are crossing the border of the linear world and the exponential world. The second frontier has to do with aspects that are not so technological, but in fact what technology brings, which are the opportunities that we have. And not only that, but the conflict with the older perspective that we had. Of course, this older perspective made us survive, but nowadays it doesn't make any sense. So, which means understanding risks as a threat. There is an entrepreneur, a business entrepreneur, who is a genius, by the way, who is called Peter Diamandis, and he talks about abundance. He says that we are ready to look at the world with fear and risk. And this happens because of our amygdala inside our brains. And this amygdala detects fears. And because of the amygdala, we were able to understand that in that savanna, there is a lion. And that's why we were able to disseminate information that there was a lion there to our offspring. But nowadays, I believe that this doesn't have any sense because the amygdala focuses on lack of something. But now we have to understand a wide range of opportunities provided by technology, and the world is not able to understand such challenges. So when we talk about poverty, when we talk about child mortality rate and war and democracy, so he brings lots of data. And it means that the world has never been better according to data. But we as human beings, as a residue of this ancestral characteristic, so we focus on the lack, not on the abundance, on the absence, not on the abundance. So this transition between absence and abundance, along with a technological improvement can make us realize a huge amount of data that is brought by IoT. Of course, we also realize the possibilities to tackle the biggest challenges in our lives. So the second frontier is this transition, right, of the old world of absence, and nowadays we can change this mindset. We can change these personal paradigms and see the world from an abundance perspective. According to Peter, he would say that when we take energy into account, in 2028, solar energy and wind energy are going to represent almost 100% of the world consumption, because technology will allow us to benefit from the energy from the sun. And the third point I would like to discuss, Victor, has to do with the local world versus the global world. Lots of people talk about this, talk about globalization, but I would say that technology has brought a different level to the idea of global network. So this means that we not only can we communicate with actors and people from different countries, but I would say that the frontiers between knowledge and markets, frontiers as a whole, they disappear. So we have a huge contrast between the old local world, in which we had competitors and they were really defined, they were really close to each other. So for instance, the prices of a certain market, so they knew their competitors. And nowadays we have a global arena in which there are no more frontiers. So prices, they are mixed in a fluid arena. For instance, Amazon started as a book selling shop. Nowadays, there's no more frontiers. We have batteries, it sells diapers, oil. And it's also selling physical goods. So the third frontier has to do with the local versus the global. And what can we expect thinking about the future? In fact, talking about the fourth frontier, this has to do with the human aspect. So medical and experts can continue, of course, can make comments, but I would say that technology has allowed the connection among people in a different political and social topography. Don Epscott said something really interesting. In the past, crowds were made of many people in the same place, but nowadays technology allowed people to be everywhere. So this means that the social topography changes a lot. So in the recent past, we had topographies that were hierarchical, really well-defined and verticalized, with solid leaders and well-defined leaders. Nowadays, we see a more horizontal-like perspective. So there's a very good example when we mention Ford T. So Ford T in 1908 was the first car, a black car. And Ford, which used to say that clients, they would be able to have cars of any color as long as it was black. But that's a joke, right? But this means a lot. So in the past, the decisions were centralized. Ford said that the cars had to be black and that's it. So the only option was a black car and that's it. So, and what made, if Ford did this nowadays, maybe the market would say a Twitter hashtag Ford no, or maybe Ford would be canceled somehow. So this means that there is an inversion of this decision-making pyramid in which the basis is more important than the top. So the top has to develop other skills, not only demanding, ordering, quite the opposite. So the leaders, the top has to create channels in order to support the customer. After all, customers and staff are more connected, they know more things, they're aware of the possibilities, and they are more demanding. We see Netflix, Spotify, Zoom, even we have the Brazilian companies, iFood, Magazine Luiza, XP. So all those companies, they are not being successful just because of technology. In fact, technology is a commodity. In fact, the strategic perspective has changed, right? So it's not only taking benefit of the technology, but understanding how this can be beneficial to human beings. So we have the balance between high touch and high tech, right? So this balance should be encouraged in order to make us evolve as human beings. So the fourth frontier, it seems to me, it is the human frontier, and we need to decrease that gap, to make that gap smaller for our abilities to take advantage of the technologies that are current nowadays, which are growing exponentially. So forums nowadays, the World Economic Forum usually publishes lists of soft skills of the 21st century. So no wonder the necessary abilities that we have to develop are human skills, because human skills, of course, they're going to be implemented by brands. So because of this, I would say that we are living a new era, a new moment, and I think we should amplify humanistic perspectives. We have to understand how we can evolve in order to project technology in a more responsible way, to consume technology in a more altruistic and positive perspective. So Darwin's idea, adaptation is fundamental, of course. But in order to reach that level, I know that my medical and Alex are going to mention these aspects. I would say that critical thinking is fundamental. We have to develop our ability to see things right better in a healthy way, not being snobbish, not being pessimistic. So we have to develop critical thinking and investigating the sources of our information, right? For many, many years, the problem was the access, but nowadays we have an access instead of an access. So we have to know what to consume, if that source is trustworthy or not. So this has to do with our cognitive skills, our social development, physical, spiritual developments. So critical thinking is essential as a prerequisite for a continuous learning. So we have to observe things better, have to be more curious, and I believe that we should develop a new level of autonomy. So in this society that is equally distributed, we won't have a boss or a leader to tell us what we should learn, or a teacher, a professor, for instance. Maybe they would change their essences in this process. So we have to lead ourselves. And this, of course, is connected to organizations. We need to be faster in decision-making processes. So we cannot wait and for the information to go up. No, we have to make decisions faster. And I think that this has to do with PKM, because we have to be more autonomous in order to identify this. So what to fish, how to process, and to whom you should provide that. So it depends on each one of us. There's a hashtag that I like to say, we are all leaders at this moment. So there's not a person demanding something from us. So I particularly believe that we are units of transformation in our lives, in our work, in our companies, in our society as a whole. And I would say that we should understand this. We should be protagonists. We have to be on ahead and be able to adapt to this new configuration. So to wrap up, we have Toffler's quote, which says we have to unlearn, learn, and relearn. So this is really complex. The world is volatile and uncertain.
This is it. You had a nice closing. Now let's talk to Américo. It's everything to do with being a protagonist, not having a world without information, now a world with lots of information. And this has everything to do with Américo is going to say, what is this PKM thing? How does it work in this process? So I'm handing over Américo, please. Thank you, Vitor. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's so good to be able to talk about this. And everyone that has already participated here, André, Vitor, I have no words. It's someone very active in our area. I would like to thank you so much for having me here in KM Brazil. And it's very good to be able to talk about it with you. I have been researching a lot in the academic world. I do not want to be too scholarly. This is not my objective. I want to be more business oriented because I have worked with companies for a long time, and now I'm more in universities, but I can have this relationship done here. So I'm going to share my screen with you. So that you can see and talk. Is everything okay, Vitor? Can I start? Yes, we can see it. Okay, let me have the presentation in the presentation mode. Well, let's talk about it. Knowledge management in organizations in our practical life. Pronesis said in Greece with Aristotle, but in the new world, the new technologies kind of way. It is in a very fast way. It has been developed very fast. And there are some essential things that we have to talk about in our civilization. And we have been doing it as a society and as a human species. And I want to say about practical wisdom with Aristotle. And this is on the book with his Ethics and Nico. So Aristotle talked about the virtue dispositions. They are 5, where the soul has the truth. So art, which is technique, scientific knowledge, practical wisdom, philosophical wisdom, and intuitive reasoning. I'm not going to talk about them individually, but I want to talk about practical wisdom, which is scientific knowledge, which has evolved a lot in the latest decades, and the practical. Scientific knowledge, we learn not a practical knowledge, but the art, the technique, it can be developed. The engineering, building things and building machines and devices, all of these come from the technique. And the practical wisdom is something different. Some matters are not reached by the practical, the scientific knowledge. It's about action, about experience. So in the organizations, the action is something very present. How do you experiment things? How can you develop some technology? How can we take action? So this comes from the practical wisdom. We have to know what is good and convenient for the person. And this is something fundamentally human. It has to do with decision-making process and the reasoning. Which one is the best decision? From there, there is Aristotle knowledge and many others. In the Middle Age, in the modern age, they got being recovered from the 19th century on. So we have the American pragmatism in the last century. And these are the 3 names, James and Dewey. James, Peirce, and Dewey in this order. So they developed not in homogeneous way. One was a chemist, the other one was a psychologist. And they influence that kind of knowledge which is acquired by experience. And there are many aspects tied to action and decision-making and context. These started with Aristotle, and they have been recovered, practiced, and developed from the American pragmatism. And this is so important that many KMers, quality management, knowledge management, and many other practices, they come from some fundamentals that were commented by these three, one especially Dewey. Many Dewey students, they were nowadays gurus, and many other KM gurus that we know in managing theory and managerial thinking. Fasting forward, there are some knowledge exponents. Not exactly learned knowledge, but personal knowledge, which is subjective. And it depends on the person's context. There are two books. Edith Penrose, she said, for one side, we have objective knowledge, which is registered. And on the other side, there is experience, which depends on the context the person is, how the person experiences their knowledge. We are getting in touch with other people's knowledge, and I'm going to internalize one or the other things. So there are some special things with Nonaki and Takeuchi. They talked about Michael Polanyi, and he was an MD. Then he had some chemistry studies. At the end of his life, he started to challenge in philosophy. And then he wrote about personal knowledge and tacit knowledge, and he emphasized. And some people will say only information instead of knowledge, which is not registered, which is the internalized knowledge of every person, which is the tacit knowledge. So Nonaki Takeuchi, as I said before, when they were writing their work in the beginning of the 90s, from them, they wrote many other books, and I would like to talk about some of them. And he talks about the practical wisdom. So he has the Knowledge Creating Company. Both of them wrote it, and many other ones. And I would like to highlight the Managing Flow, which was published in Portuguese some years now. And they started developing effectively some concepts applied to management. And the other one, which is the Wise Company, we do not have a Portuguese version yet. And they highlight many things, and they perfect and develop even further the knowledge spiral, which everyone knows about it. And this is about the phronesis, the practical wisdom, which is about the cycle knowledge. So there are some characteristics, some highlights Nonaki and Takeuchi did in the Wise Company. So the first one, there is action, context, which leads to decision, and there is also kindness. So the practical wisdom goes in a way that is good. So it is in this way, about the good things, the good accomplishment. So there are scientific knowledge. There is scientific knowledge now, which have been developed. And you can use technology for different ends, and it can be very overwhelming. Which Singularity author talked about it. So there is also, this knowledge can be used also in a war. So this practice depends on how you are going to use the knowledge, and it depends on your experience as well. And we have the episteme, which is the why, techne, the how, which is how the knowledge is going to be used, and phronesis is how should be done. And there are some capacities: judging, decisions, sharing the essence of knowledge to the different people, to be guided by the good and what can be common for the society. And it is also the direction for the knowledge spiral, and is the basis for the correct decision and the search for excellence. We have to excel in being a better person, and this is the basis of the practical wisdom. And in 1999, they are one of the first ways of tracking, of searching knowledge. It's Pkm. We have Jason Friend and Carol Hickson in 1999. He was a mathematician, Mr. Friend, in UCLA. And Carol Hickson was there at the same time in the information area, economics. And they joined their talents and they wrote about it, Pkm. Today, Friend is retired, Hickson is in Florida, and they have a Pkm Concept, which is a conceptual framework to organize and integrate information. That we have a strategy for transforming the different pieces of information that can be systematically applied and that expands our personal knowledge. In 1999 was in the beginning of the internet, and nowadays the information is exponentially distributed around the world, and everything is more complete, needed, and important. So we have to remember essence, practical wisdom, they are very important. There are some conceptual aspects in Pkm. I have written many things with some orientees of mine. Pkm is focused in a top-down, a bottom-up approach with an individual perspective to KM. It has to allow individuals to choose which information to collect, how structures, and who share them with. People need to be capable to manage their own information in a significant way, accessible when necessary, and easily explored. Pkm allows workers to organize content and paper content. And it's also used to design the individual process in managing knowledge, incorporated and codified. And it's a disciplined individual process where everyone are going to judge information. Another very important book on Pkm is David Pauline and Gorman, which is Individual Organization and Social Perspectives, Individual Customization, Disposition for Continuous Learning, Social Interaction and Network Formation, Use of Technology to improve the organization, and Capability of Predict and Anticipate, derived for ability, skills, and sensitivity. The more you do it, the more sensitive we will be to manage knowledge. And in Gorman and Pauline perspective, which is the individual development, Pkm can manage not only the careers, but it can promote other kinds of learning, networking, net learning, and we can be more reflexive and more wise about life and society as a whole. Then Pauline organized with couples many books on KM and about the practical wisdom. And there are two books, the Handbook of Practical Wisdom, 2012 and 2013, and the Practical Wisdom in the Age of Technology, where they organized many interesting topics about technological change and how we can extract these with our practical wisdom in decision-making process, how we are going to put ourselves in this world. And now I would like to talk about the researches I liked, I helped putting together in the last 6 or 7 years. In strategy in Federal University of Rio de Janeiro and UFF. So in SBGC, they know it, and there was a PhD also, PhD studies, which is being developed. And we can talk about KM also in both universities. I'm going to highlight very fast some things now. The first one was Priscilla about Pkm in the managing in the business university, business course, in a corporate university. So she compared Pkm in professors in a traditional university, as we know, and in a corporate university of a big Brazilian company, and the differences between both cases. And then she could put together a framework with 4 dimensions: a formal, a practical, an individual, and an organizational one. So one of the fields to follow in Vasconcelos' case, it was a Pkm, a case study with senior researchers. He worked in a company and saw how Pkm is done in a big organization. So with the senior researchers, people who are consultants and have broad experience in the area. And the most part of the research that I have all guided, there is a framework, a reference structure to understand this phenomenon. So in the Carlos Henrique Vasconcelos case, he was bound how to manage knowledge demands, manage learning, manage connections and learning. From this cycle, he could generate a feedback that can explain this cycle, all of them, all of the cases, connections, demands of knowledge, learning, and so on and so forth. Fabio, in his turn, he worked with Pkm. It is not written right here, but his objective is to investigate the lessons learned practice and the learners in their practice. So he could make a system and how this organization in a business project, in a team of a university, a federal university, how this practice could be systematized before Pkm and organizational knowledge. And he could put a cycle together where there's a relationship between documents, people, assimilate and share knowledge, comment and share also. Chloe developed some knowledge Pkm practices in the service area. So he worked with people that work with contracts, service contracts in an energy company. So his research question, which are the practices of PKM that facilitate models in the process, in the service hiring activity. So he made a relationship between process and knowledge in a continuous improvement in the hiring of services. That is, there is the contracts, they see the gaps, this service process is modeled, generates knowledge, and then it's going to have feedback for the contract management. Then Alexandre, his work was about PKM, where organizational activities, he had a framework also where he related specialists' action and expertise in a consulting company, and the cycle he developed was tied to cultivate the environment in the CC model, and he connected the cultivate environment, technology disseminate, process, internalization of process systematizate, and dialogue with people in the socialization. So externalizing, dialoguing with people. Cultivate, disseminate, systemize, and dialogue with people, in his case. And Valeria, she developed a framework with a relationship with KMers, PKMers, about the senior researchers in the other case study. Here is technology, where PKM and technology management of R&D, they generate input, and this input receives the lessons learned from technological management and KPM. Deborah, in her turn, she developed an PKM in undergraduate courses in a public university and how it works. So her cycle, there are three relevant dimensions: the context in the university, the process of the PKM, and content, sharing knowledge, managing time, which is only a little time, critical capacity, integration, collaboration, and other topics. So she was inspired with this PKM. It was something classic that has been developed in 25 years. So it was adapted and applied to Deborah's study about undergraduate courses in a federal university, public university. So it's still talking about an academic context, talking about PKM. How can we implement this in a coaching process as a tool in undergraduate student development? Leonardo Fernandes Souto was the researcher. So he identified possibilities and believed that university role is not only theoretical and technical competencies development. It has to be broader. It has to get closer to the student so that they can develop their being and use PKM to broaden their self-knowledge. So these relationships between coaching and PKM and how one area can help the other, and how it can be a fundamental facilitator in the preparation of these students and these professionals. So, talking about the bottom line of all these researchers, PKM has lots of influencers. So, many of these researchers that I have shown, it depends on the organization the person is inserted. How can the researchers in any given company, PKM has all these particularities. But in another context, with another company, for example, a financial company, other things are going to happen because there is the organizational, professional, cultural, contextual influence. Everything that we are learning in the time, space, relationship, what was talked about a lot 20 years ago, it's not anymore. So the technological aspects, we are more and more influenced by it. And all of this makes to the individual aspect, the me inside all of this. How am I going to develop myself? How do I manage my personal knowledge? It all gets in touch with the organization where I work, the aspects of my professional line of work, my context where I work, and technology aspects as well. So, many years ago, we used to write on paper, and nowadays it's technological. But is it that different? This is food for thought. So, having this in mind, how can I go after the technology or fast forward in front of it? So I was inspired by Alex, Conrado Schlossauer, José Mauro Nunes, and many other people in the KM area, in the academia, in practical, the practice. So one aspect is curating. How can we manage all of these aspects? How can we filter and absorb the knowledge? And curating can help us. And there's the snowball. A recent post by Conrado where he inspires in 01 book. And after all, he ends up adapting a determined field of knowledge that we end up learning. So I would like to talk about the snowball. We keep accumulating many things and end up doing nothing. So by my experience, my practical experience in organizations and university, one topic is going to pull another one and we get accumulating. And then we expand. We expand our knowledge, not only the theoretical one, but how we are going to practice it. And there are reflection time where you can live internally, which is another article that was posted before. It's about Schultzauer. Schultz was a Secretary of Defense. I mean, Secretary of State. I need 1 hour for me. Only one person can interrupt me in this hour. Only the president or my wife can interrupt me. Then...
So, if he was just thinking about daily routine and actions, so he wouldn't be able to think about new ideas. So he looked for that moment for himself. So he wanted to analyze himself, to reach the sense, how he ascribes meaning to what he does. We also have practical wisdom, so which means the development of what you do, the ability of making decisions. In a nutshell, the ability of guiding, and of course, knowing yourself. Sometimes you follow other people's ideas, you should do this or that. So you should develop your personal knowledge, use this or that technology, that's great. But don't you think that maybe it would be better to think about yourself? Of course, you can incorporate many things, but you have to make your own choices. And that's why you have to know yourself. You must do that. It is a fundamental issue for your existence. And finally, we have love. So the final objective of practical wisdom is developing not only your well-being, but good things to other people. So you do not love people, so you cannot develop this practical wisdom. And of course, you cannot develop PKM that would lead you to making good decisions, not only for yourself, but for other people as well. Just to wrap up, I'm developing something new, something from my old research project. It's a project along with UFF, which has to do with PKM and wisdom practice in organizations. So I'm going to continue working with different occupational activities, of course, and I will take into account all the context of new technologies and new organizational configurations. So it means that, as I have mentioned, and that I mentioned the importance of changes. And of course, changes are connected to technologies and the society, organizations we are in. So what do we expect? We expect to map these different activity profiles to evaluate in a comparative way, of course, technologies and organizations, to evaluate the impact of the specialist, and of course, to analyze reference frames in order to provide us with patterns, relationships, and causality. And I'm building this with different students, different projects. They are master's students, master's degree students. So this group is called Practices, Wisdom, and Conducts. So we have practices, which is managed by PKM. PKM generates values, behaviors. So we have a cycle here. So everything is connected. So practices develop wisdom, and wisdom generates behavior. It's a virtuous cycle, and we have a cycle within that cycle. We also have the opportunity to promote some webinars, and those webinars deal with PKM with Vitor. The first one was done by Vitor. The second one, we had Estela Fernandez from UFRRJ. So she's a consultant of the area. We also have something from Enampad, and when we talk about wisdom, practical wisdom, and we have developed, we have talked to professors and teachers, and we deal with PKM and its development. So to wrap up, I don't know if I have talked too much, but I would like to finish my lecture with a poem, with an excerpt from a poem called The Rat from 1934. It was written by T.S. Eliot. There are 3 sentences that are going to see. What is the life we have lost in living? What is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? What is the knowledge we have lost in information? So somebody would say, so this is the famous acronym, data, information, and knowledge and wisdom. Is that the acronym? Maybe it was inspired by T.S. Eliot's poem, but we don't have proof for that, evidence for that. And of course, data, the word data is missing. Some people have incorporated that. Hickson's seminal study, they have incorporated the date where we have lost the information, but he didn't say that. So I would like to finish my presentation. I would like to thank you for the opportunity. I hope that I could make you reflect upon what I have just said. So one more time, once again, thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Americo, for the excellent foundations that you have exposed us. Lots of content, absolutely lots of reference material for people that are interested in this theme. So now we're going to have Alex Britas to wrap up our session in 10 minutes maybe, and then we have time for Q&A. I don't know if we can do that, but okay, in a practical way. hands-on. So how can we perform this self-learning procedure? So you're an expert in this. So this is connected to Pkm, right? So you have your autonomous for your own learning. And Alex is a big expert in this area. He has lived that. So the floor is yours. The stage is yours. Thank you very much, Victor. Andrea Medico, thank you very much for being here. I have learned a lot from you, including this quote by T.S. Eliot. I have copied this quote by T.S. Eliot. Thank you very much for sharing. So let me just share my presentation. So I will try to be fast. So my message is learning to learn. And this has everything to do with Pkm. Of course, it has other names, other terms, other concepts. But I would say that it has absolutely everything to do with Pkm. So we learn to walk as we walk. So we have to do something as this little doll here, right? Is moving. We have this little man here setting himself free, setting himself from the straight lines. And this requires effort in a collaborative way. And I believe that we should behave as this little boy, because we get so much used to the traditional way of teaching and learning, right? I believe that people that are watching us, they have begun their learning process, right? And they have learned at school for many, many years, for 14, 15 years. So we are shaped somehow. That's why we have to make lots of effort to find our authenticity. And many times this authenticity cannot express itself in these traditional systems. And those systems, sometimes they exclude some things and some people, right? So my process has begun with this crowdfunding campaign. We have started before, but that's a very important symbol. In 2013-14, I was really interested in writing a book about teaching and learning among adults. It was a very strong topic to me back then. I was very curious to know and to investigate this topic. So I didn't want to do that in a traditional way. Of course, I respect academia, universities, of course, but I wanted to do this differently. That's why I have begun this campaign, this crowdfunding campaign, in 2014. Lots of effort, lots of luck, lots of people helped me in this process. And then I could gather this amount of money. And because of that, I was able to study and research and perform interviews, talking to people. And this resulted in the publication of the book. And the book was published in 2016, and another book as well. So in this process, I have traveled to different countries, as you can see, different projects. Sometimes I could not be there in person, but I talked to lots of people. This map, I can make this map available. I call this map the Innovating Universities. They don't have just universities, but they are educational projects aimed at adults and young adults. And those projects, they take risks. They take risks to develop their own method in an autonomous way, self-managed. And I would say that I like to collect those projects. They teach me a lot. I learned this in very different ways, from different perspectives. And this has everything to do with Pkm. And this was inspired by those projects. Here we have some logos of the projects. Some projects I have studied. Some of them are connected to formal education. Some of them are connected to informal education, communities of people that gather around informally. So it was very, very good especially in alternative education. So this is a great source of inspiration, and not only for me, but for us that work with PKM and KM in general. So we have the books that are the result of this program that I have aimed at. On the right, we have a translation. So the art of self-managed learning. So for the ones who are interested, you can access those books via this link. It's a free download. So you can learn more from these books, right? They go deeper. So it's worth having a look at those books. So just have to access this link and download those files. So now I'm going to tell you about my message. So how we can do it. There was an acronym that Conrado and I have developed. We use this acronym a lot in our own PKM process. And we present this to people in our workshops, mentorships, teaching and learning workshops, which is SEP plus R. So it revolves around, it is connected to, content, experience, people, and network. So by having these 4 sources, people can learn whatever they want. At least one aspect of PKM. Let's talk about content, C. So content equals education. So we are learning a book, we are consuming content, we are watching a YouTube video, we are consuming information and content. André and Americo said that the big issue concerning content is that we have lots of access to lots of files. So it's very tough not to be anxious. So we cannot navigate this ocean, right? E stands for experience. So C, content, E, experience. So we like to use this source of knowledge because we put knowledge into practice. We test a hypothesis in practice, in the real world. It sounds complex, but it's not. So I always use Conrado's example. When we prepare a risotto, we can read all the best recipes to cook a risotto. We have a mentorship from a chef that is an expert in risottos. But we are going to be able to learn how to cook a risotto in practice, hands-on, when we approach the cooker and mix the ingredients and serve that food, and the person can praise you for their food. So experience is something really important in the learning process. So we can use this factor in a very intentional way in the process. So you can set a challenge for yourself. So you can travel, for instance, it could be a learning experience. There are many ways to use E, experience, to potentialize your path. P stands for people. So we learn from people since the beginning of the world, right? So since we were in caves. So we can use people, in a very intentional way when we use PKM. Let me give you an example. I'm going to talk to you about interview. So maybe I can talk to Victor, and I have met Victor sometimes. I know that he knows a lot about PKM, but at the same time, I want to know more things about PKM. So Victor, let me ask a question. You have 30 minutes or 40 minutes to call me, and then I could interview you about this topic. So I can prepare some questions beforehand. So his experience, how he was able to build this knowledge, what are his preferences, things he studied, experiences that he had lived, had undergone, right? So you can have a script, right? So I can do that. Besides, I can ask him all the people that he could mention in order to make me learn about this topic. So in one of the books that I have written, I talk about chicken. So this, like chicken's food. So it is a technique that I have developed because if you want to know more about something, you can ask other people. So you can navigate in this ocean, in this network. It's a wonderful process. So you can establish connections, you can make friends, and those friendships, they have a reason because of this contact. And R stands for network in English, which means a group of people that are organized, and they have an objective, like SPGC. They are a network, and we have other examples as well. So I would say that for any topic that we want to research, if we want to know how to cook risotto, we can access a network of chefs or other professionals. So there are lots of networks. So of course, internet is a huge place for networks. So that's the meaning of CEP plus R. So it's a menu of opportunities, of learning opportunities. Concerning the interviews, so I have mentioned the meaning of those interviews. We don't have time. And then let's talk about, you have to have some time to learn. So concerning routines, Victor, at the beginning of his presentation, he mentioned this topic. So we have to manage the routine. It is really important in PKM. So you have to devote time to learn. It is a very important element in this aspect. I would say that I usually recommend 2 ways of doing that. There's a 5-hour rule, right? And this 5-hour rule is very famous, that lots of thinkers and other famous people, they devote 5 times to learn every week. So when I read about it, I mean, I cannot say that everybody does this, right? But I would say that I try to imagine maybe you could devote 30 times to learn. Maybe it could be something like, I don't know, you can reflect upon certain topics, reading time, note-taking. You can write a journal. You can reflect upon something to yourself. So this moment can be manifold. So it's important to devote time for that. So you can do that on a daily basis, but you can do that once a week. This happened to me. I'm doing this once a week. For instance, Friday mornings, I devote some time to learn, and then I separate my actions towards learning in order to have this moment on Friday. It is really interesting. And then we're able to build the habit of doing this. So we can put this into practice without resorting to will or a huge struggle. Every time you should think about that. It's part of the habit. A medical, when he talked about curating, with that an unconventional way of performing curating based on my experiences, on my learning experiences, the concept of learning out loud, which is a variation of working out loud. What is this? You have to learn, and how would you learn? So you're able to learn in a frequent way. So each time you share an experience, a learning experience, you are curating yourself. You're forming your own curating process. I do not know if this happens to you, but in my case, if I do not take notes, if I do not process that, if I do not type and share what I'm learning, right? If I do not do this, I forget what I'm studying. So I have developed a habit to share on Instagram and other social networks at least one small text every day connected to something that I've been learning or something I've been doing. And once a week, I write something a little bit more robust, right, about this topic. So it's a very interesting way to link learning and sharing, right? It fits my routine. So I start sharing what I learned in small doses, and then I can get those pieces, right? And then create something bigger out of those pieces. So here we have an example of how we can use learning out loud hands-on in practice. So I have a online program, which is a community of practice, which is called Masters of Learning. We had the privilege of having Victor as one of the guests. So we have come up with a portfolio, a collective portfolio. You have the link here, all right, as you can see. So it's public. Everybody can access this link. And I found a way to engage people to this program, to share in a continuous way what they are learning. Each person has a different journey of learning, connected to a specific team, so we can gather those pieces, right? They could be texts, they could be multimedia, lots of interesting things, lots of forums. So I really get excited for what people share in this place. So to wrap up, let me give you some examples. I have started researching something at the beginning of the year, which is called learning habits. And this study sums up some concepts that I've been talking to you. I would say that if you want to practice learning as we live, we should, in order to learn every single time, we have to have muscles. And of course, those muscles stem from learning habits. So the difference between habits and a conscious decision is that habits are internalized, so you don't have to think about it. So I would say that half of our daily decisions and daily actions are habits. So if you want to develop those muscles, you have to develop habits. So I have begun to develop some categories. I cannot talk about them. We don't have time. That is not our objective. But just for you to have a quick look about the learning habits that are stemming from my research. And I have written an ebook, and this ebook has challenges connected to these new categories. It is available in my website. You can download it. And here we have some examples that I find to be really interesting. And they can make us reflect upon PKM. So we have the idea of Notion, right? I have taken a print screen of my Notion, which is an app. I have discovered this app in the Masters of Learning program, and I have been using this app very often, I must say. So here we have my notes, everything that I have learned and I have consumed, conversations with people. So I start taking notes of everything that I have learned. And as you can see here, many of those things that are in Notion, they have become posts. They have turned into text that got a bit longer. I could share those things. I could present lectures based on those things. So it's a repository with lots of templates. So it's worth having a look at it. So the site is notion.so. So if you want to have a look, it's a very complete app. So I would say some of us like simpler ways of establishing knowledge processing. So my girlfriend, Marceli, she has WhatsApp groups with herself, lots and lots and lots about different topics. So DHO, so being healthy, so we can do that. So WhatsApp is something that we use on a daily basis. So I would say that maybe it's easier if we did this, right? If we use WhatsApp with that purpose. So you can create a WhatsApp group and then you insert somebody else and remove somebody that you know, and then you can be there by yourself. Here we have another example. You can continue. So hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I think we had
do pessoal vai ficar disponível, tá? Acho que o Alex já estava no finalzinho, então vocês não perderam muito. Ele compartilhou basicamente algumas ideias de como fazer o compartilhamento do conhecimento, tá, pessoal? Eu vi que a gente recebeu algumas perguntas aqui, então para a gente não atrasar ainda mais o horário, né? Porque vai ter um próximo painel daqui a pouco. Eu vou pegar essas perguntas, vou mandar para eles vão responder e depois eu compartilho com vocês, porque eu vi quem fez as perguntas, então depois eu compartilho. André e Américo.
So, could you please? Pleasure to listen to Americo and Alex. Of this meeting, of this panel, I have learned a lot. I know that we are all inspired because of many things that we have learned. We are in a world in transformation, and of course, academia as well, that Professor Americo has mentioned, and Alex's website. So if you want to follow me, you can access my site, andrebello with 2 L's.com.br, so you can access it. Andrebello with double L. Thank you very much, Victor. So I'd like to thank you for the participation. And I'm really thankful for the opportunity of talking to André and Alex. Thank you very much, Victor, for the invitation, for moderating this session. So this topic that we have been discussing is an integration of different aspects. So the knowledge that has been acquired so far, that ranges from the formal aspect of academia to our daily routines, our daily lives in organizations and enterprises in life, I would say that we had the opportunity to look at all those perspectives and how they can be really positive in a virtuous cycle, not in a vicious cycle. So one more time, thank you very much for the opportunity. And my email is americoramos@ib.uff.br, so I can make it available to make it easier. All right. And if you want to talk to me, so I am available. So we have LinkedIn. Of course, you can talk to me via LinkedIn. Thank you very much. And see you next time.
Bom, agora que eu reparei que eu sou o único não fluminense aqui, né?
So I'm not from Rio. I'm the only one not from Rio. At least by the accent. Maybe I'm wrong. So I'm really happy to be here with incredible people that I admire.
Eu fiquei pensando numa frase assim que eu acho que é legal nesse contexto.
So I have remembered a sentence by Taylor. He says that being a genius is as common as the land itself, which means that learning and self-learning is a process that helps us have this genius aspect blossoming from us. So it's a pleasure to be here. You can access my website, alexbritas.com, and my Instagram, alexbritas11. If you want, you can follow me. There are lots of content, and we can talk there. Thank you very much. So thank you. So I'm thanking for the interpreters, Denise Chipulo and Felipe Pazello, and we're going to start our session in some minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Victor, for moderating our session. André, Alex, Americo. I'm sorry, we had some technical issues here, but now everything has been solved. Our next section starts in 12 minutes. So we have some panelists that are here in person. They are from São Paulo. So they are here in Uninove, São Paulo with us. So the panel talks about sectorial innovation. So we have Soraya from Sírio-Libanês Hospital, Leonardo Bruno from Matos Filhos Advocacy Group. We have Alexandre Calil from University Lab and Felipe Pacheco from Uninove, our university. So they're going to be moderated by Alessandro Tado from SBGC. So thank you. I would like to be really thankful for the interpreters that are interpreting from Portuguese into English, because our event is being streamed internationally. So we have people from different countries here. So the interpreters are Felipe Pazello and Denise Chipulo. Thank you very much. So we are going to come back in 11 minutes. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you soon.